Between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, there once stretched a land of quiet brilliance. Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, was home to some of humanity's earliest cities, where mud brick towers rose above fertile plains, where scribes pressed reeds into clay to record the first written words, and where markets filled with goods carried from distant lands. It was here that time itself began to be measured, that laws were carved into stone, and that people built the foundations of so much that would follow. And yet, for all that was achieved, much has been forgotten. The voices of the people who lived there have long since faded. Their streets are silent, their temples crumbled, their libraries buried beneath sand and dust. What remains are fragments, broken tablets, ruined walls, faint carvings that whisper secrets only to those who pause to listen. Tonight, we will journey calmly through that ancient world. We will walk beside the rivers, step into the daily lives of farmers and artisans, wander through markets and palaces, and watch as cities rise and then slowly fall into silence. This will not be a tale of kings alone, but of people families, traders, scribes whose quiet efforts shaped the first great civilization. Before we begin, take a slow breath and let yourself settle into the calm of history. And if you find peace in these journeys, remember to support the channel with a like and subscribe, so you will not miss the next story waiting in the quiet echoes of the past. Now, let us begin with the lost secrets of Mesopotamia, secrets that few remember, but which still linger in the silence of its ruins. When we begin to trace the story of Mesopotamia, we must first follow the water. Without the Tigris and the Euphrates, there would have been no fields, no villages, no cities, and no civilization to remember. These two rivers, rising in distant mountains and flowing steadily across plains, carved a landscape that was at once generous and unpredictable. They brought life to otherwise dry soil, but they also carried danger in their floods. To live between them was to live in balance with water, always watching, always adapting, always working with the rhythm of the rivers. Imagine the land at dawn thousands of years ago. The sun is only just beginning to rise, spilling gold across the flat horizon. The rivers lie calm in the morning stillness, their surfaces smooth as glass, reflecting the pale sky. Along their banks, reeds grow tall, rustling softly in the breeze, and birds rise in sudden flocks, filling the air with movement. Families step from mud brick homes, carrying baskets and tools, ready to tend the fields that stretch away from the water's edge. These fields, green and fertile, are the gift of the rivers, and they will feed the people who live here if they are cared for with patience and skill. The Tigris and Euphrates did not flow gently like tame streams. They surged and shifted, their waters rising with the melting of distant snows, falling with the heat of summer. In some years their floods were generous, spreading water across fields, leaving behind rich silt that nourished crops. In other years they came too strong, too high, sweeping away homes and drowning harvests. And sometimes the rains failed, the floods did not come, and the land dried into dust. To live here was to live with uncertainty, and so the people of Mesopotamia learned to master the rivers, not by stopping them, but by guiding them. Step quietly into the fields, and you will see the work of countless hands. Canals stretch like narrow veins from the rivers, carrying water across the plain. Ditches crisscross the land, diverting the flow ensuring that every patch of soil receives its share. Small gates of clay or wood control the passage of water, opened or closed by farmers who know the needs of each season. This is irrigation, the lifeline of Mesopotamia, and it is more than simple digging. It is planning, cooperation, and memory passed from one generation to the next. Each family tended not only their fields, but also their section of the canals. For if the water did not flow for one, it would not flow for all. The rivers gave more than crops. They gave clay, soft and abundant, shaped into bricks for houses, temples, and walls. They gave reeds woven into mats, baskets, and boats. They gave fish for food, water for drinking, and paths for travel. Canoes slipped quietly along their surfaces, carrying goods and people between villages and towns. Traders moved along these watery roads, their voices drifting over the water as they exchanged salt, grain, cloth, and pottery. The rivers were not boundaries, but bridges, linking distant communities into a single pulsing network of life. Yet with their gifts came challenges. To build along the rivers was to risk their floods. Villages rose and fell with the moods of the water. Families rebuilt homes more than once, patching walls, reshaping canals, moving when the land grew too dry or too wet. The people learned to respect the rivers, to see them not as servants but as partners, sometimes generous, sometimes harsh, always powerful. The story of Mesopotamia is the story of this relationship, a quiet negotiation between land, water, and people. Picture a farmer standing at the edge of his field. The sun is high, the air warm, and the canal glitters as water runs through it. He carries a wooden hoe, its edge worn smooth from years of use. With practiced movements, he clears debris from the ditch, ensuring that water flows freely. His children follow behind, carrying baskets of reeds to repair small walls. The work is steady, rhythmic, almost meditative. In these simple tasks lies the foundation of the civilization that will rise here, the care of the rivers, the management of the soil, the patient shaping of a landscape that could sustain thousands. But life by the rivers was not only about work, it was also about community. Neighbors depended on one another, for a broken canal upstream could mean dry fields downstream. Villages gathered to repair dikes, to dig new channels, to clear silt. The sound of shovels striking earth, of voices calling across the fields, of laughter and conversation filled the air. These moments of cooperation bound people together, creating ties that would one day grow into cities, into governments, into laws that organized the work of many. The rivers demanded unity, and from that demand, society was born. As cities rose, the rivers remained their constant companions. The great city of yore stood near the Euphrates, its walls strong, its ziggurat towering above the plain. Canals wound through its outskirts, feeding fields that stretched far into the horizon. Boats carried grain into the city, where markets overflowed, with food, textiles, pottery, and goods from distant lands. The rivers were the arteries of trade, pulsing with movement, bringing life to the heart of Mesopotamia. Without them, the city would have been an island of stone in a desert of dust. With them, it became a beacon of civilization. And yet, the rivers also reminded people of fragility. Floods could strike without warning, undoing years of labor in a single night. Droughts could linger, leaving canals dry, crops withered, granaries empty. Families knew that their lives depended on forces beyond their control, forces that could not be tamed, only respected. This awareness shaped their view of the world, taught them patience, humility, and the importance of preparation. To live here was to live with the knowledge that life was both abundant and fragile, that survival depended on both human effort and the mercy of the rivers. God imagined now the quiet of evening along the Euphrates. The sun has set, the sky glows, faintly pink, and the water reflects the last light of day. Families gather near the banks, children play at the edge, their laughter mingling with the gentle sound of flowing water. Fishermen pull in their nets, carrying their catch home for the evening meal. The air is cooler, softer, filled with the scent of earth and reeds. In this calm, the rivers seem eternal, their steady flow a promise that life will continue tomorrow. As it did today, but we, standing centuries later, know what the people of that time did not. We know that cities will rise and fall, that canals will silt over, that homes will crumble. We know that the rivers, once lifelines, will sometimes betray their people, leaving them to struggle, to move, to abandon the places they built. And yet, in this knowledge, there is no bitterness, only a quiet respect for the resilience of those who lived with the rivers, who shaped their lives around water, who created a civilization that endures in memory. The Tigris and Euphrates were more than rivers. They were the foundation of Mesopotamia, the silent partners in its rise and its fall. Their waters carried the seeds of life, the weight of trade, the stories of generations. Their banks held laughter and sorrow, labor and rest, beginnings and endings. To understand Mesopotamia, we must listen to their rivers, for in their flow, we hear the rhythm of a civilization that shaped the world. And so, as we close this first step in our journey, let the sound of water guide your thoughts. Imagine the steady murmur of the rivers, soft and endless, carrying silt and memory across the land. Imagine the farmers bending to tend their fields, the children playing at the banks, the traders guiding their boats. Imagine the peace of evening, settling over the plains, the rivers gleaming under the stars. This is the beginning of Mesopotamia, the secret at its heart, that all life here began with water, and that the rivers, patient and eternal, still carry their silent story through time. The rivers gave life, but it was people who shaped that life into something greater. At first, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates was dotted with small farming villages, clusters of mud brick homes, families working their fields, neighbors sharing the labor of irrigation canals. Yet slowly, steadily, these villages grew. Fields became larger, trade became busier, and families became communities bound together, not just by survival, but by shared purpose. From this quiet expansion came one of humanity's most profound changes, the birth of cities that imagined the plains centuries ago. Villages scattered across fertile soil, each with its fields of maize, barley, or wheat. The houses were simple, their walls of mud brick, their roofs of reed. Smoke curled from hearths at dawn. Children ran barefoot in the dust. Farmers walked to their fields with tools in hand. Life was modest but steady, tied to the rhythm of the rivers. Yet within these villages, change was already stirring. As people learned to grow more food than their families alone could eat, surpluses gathered. With surpluses came trade. With trade came wealth. And with wealth came the seeds of complexity. Step into one such village. The market is no longer a small affair of neighbors exchanging baskets of grain. Now strangers arrive, traders from other settlements carrying goods not found here. A farmer with surplus barley might trade for salt. A fisherman with a heavy catch might trade for pottery. Slowly, goods begin to move farther, and people begin to look beyond their own walls. These exchanges required more space, more organization. The heart of the village became a plaza, a place for trade, conversation, and gatherings. Around this plaza, the first hints of urban life appeared. But trade alone does not make a city. Leadership did. In these growing settlements, decisions had to be made: how to divide water fairly, how to protect fields from floods, how to settle disputes. At first, elders or councils guided the village. But as populations grew, as canals lengthened, as trade became more complex, stronger leadership emerged. Someone had to oversee the storage of grain, someone to organize labor for building walls, someone to lead when conflict arose. From these needs, the first leaders took their place, not yet kings, but figures of authority whose presence bound people together. As leadership grew, so did construction. Villages of scattered homes became settlements with walls, plazas, and temples. Mud brick, abundant and easy to shape, rose into structures that loomed above simple houses. Picture the building of one such temple. Families gather, carrying baskets of clay, water, and reeds. They knead the mixture, shape it into bricks, and lay them one upon another, building walls that stretch upward. Each person contributes, for this is not only a building, but a symbol of unity. When the temple stands, it becomes the heart of the settlement, a place not only of ritual, but of memory, of gathering, of identity. Step forward in time, and these settlements grow larger still. Uruk, one of the first true cities, rises from the plain. Its walls stretch wide, enclosing thousands of people. Its temples soar above the horizon, massive and imposing. Streets wind between houses and workshops, markets fill with traders, and scribes record transactions on clay tablets. To enter Uruk is to feel the shift from village to city, from modest life to complex society. Here are artisans shaping pottery, metal workers hammering tools, weavers creating cloth, traders loading donkeys with goods. Here is specialization, the dividing of labor that allows a city to thrive. Imagine walking its streets. The walls are high, built to protect against raids. Gates open onto bustling roads where carts creak, children play, and neighbors greet one another. Houses line the streets, their courtyards filled with the smell of baking bread, the hum of weaving, the chatter of families. In the market, voices rise in bargaining, goods from distant lands displayed on mats and tables. At the center stands a towering ziggurat, its steps rising toward the sky, a mountain built by human hands. Around it, plazas fill with people, ceremonies unfold, and the life of the city pulses steady and strong. But with growth came challenges. Feeding thousands required careful planning. Grain had to be stored, measured, and distributed. Canals had to be maintained, dikes repaired, fields protected. This required organization, records, and rules. And so the scribes pressed reeds into boo, wet clay marking numbers, names, and goods. These clay tablets dried in the sun, hardening into permanent records. They tell us of rations distributed to workers, of trade agreements, of debts and payments. With each mark, the city grew more complex, more connected, more enduring. Writing, born from the need to manage surplus, became one of Mesopotamia's greatest gifts to the world. The rise of cities also changed daily life. No longer did everyone work only in the fields. Some became potters, others weavers, others builders, others soldiers. Specialization allowed skill to deepen, and with skill came innovation. Pottery grew more refined, tools stronger, textiles richer. Markets expanded, filled with goods not only from nearby villages, but from lands far beyond the rivers. To walk through a Mesopotamian city was to walk through a place alive with craft, exchange, and possibility. Yet with growth also came inequality. Some families prospered, gathering wealth and influence. Others struggled, their labor supporting the grandeur of temples and palaces. Leaders rose to kingship, their authority both political and symbolic. Palaces expanded, their walls decorated with carvings, their halls filled with attendants. Soldiers stood guard, scribes recorded laws, artisans crafted luxury goods for rulers. The city, once a gathering of equals, became layered, structured, ordered. It was no longer only a home. It was a system, one that demanded loyalty and labor from its people. Still, for the ordinary citizen, life in the city held both burden and blessing. Work was hard, but the markets offered abundance. Rules constrained, but they also brought stability. Temples demanded offerings, but they also gave a sense of community. Families lived close together. Neighbors watched over one another, and in the evenings, streets filled with conversation, laughter, and music. To live in a Mesopotamian city was to feel both the weight of obligation and the comfort of belonging. As more cities rose your Babylon, Nineveh, the land between the rivers, became a patchwork of urban centers, each with its own rulers, its own walls, its own ambitions. They traded, they rivaled, they sometimes fought. Together, they shaped Mesopotamia into a world of complexity, where the city became the defining feature of human life. The birth of cities was not sudden but steady, a slow transformation carried by rivers, by fields, by trade, by the hands of countless ordinary people. And so, when we think of Mesopotamia's lost secrets, we must remember this: the greatest secret may not be in the ruins of temples or the records of kings, but in the quiet rise of the city itself. For here, in mud brick walls and bustling streets, humanity made one of its most profound steps from village life to urban life, from simple survival to complex society. Tonight, as you let your thoughts drift, picture one of those cities at dusk. The sun sets behind its walls, casting golden light across the ziggurat. The market's quiet, the voices soften, the smell of evening meals drifts from homes. Children play in courtyards, families gather, torches flicker to life. The city breathes, with calm, steady, and enduring. This is the birth of the city, the birth of a world that still shapes us today. To understand the greatness of Mesopotamia, we must leave the towering ziggurats and grand palaces behind and step quietly into the narrow lanes of ordinary neighborhoods. Here, among the mud brick houses, the scent of bread, the sound of weaving, and the laughter of children, we find the true heartbeat of this ancient world. Kings ruled, scribes recorded, and priests led ceremonies. But it was the daily lives of ordinary men, women, and children that carried the civilization forward, one sunrise at a time. Imagine the dawn in a Mesopotamian city. The sky glows faintly, pink as the sun climbs above the flat horizon. Roosters call, dogs stir, and the city wakes slowly. From small doorways of mud brick houses, families step into courtyards, stretching after the night's rest. Smoke begins to rise from hearths as fires are lit for the morning meal. The rhythmic grinding of grain against stone metates begins, filling the air with a steady, familiar sound. This grinding is the start of almost every day, for bread is the staple food, and every family must prepare it. Mothers and daughters lean patiently over the stones, turning grain into flour, mixing it with water, shaping it into flat rounds to bake on hot clay ovens. The smell drifts through the neighborhood, warm and comforting, promising strength for the day's labor. Fathers and sons prepare for the fields. Those who live near the city walls may walk out into the countryside, carrying hoes, plows, or baskets. Farmers in Mesopotamia know the rivers as their constant companions. Some dig canals, guiding the precious water into their fields. Others tend to barley, wheat, or dates, watching carefully for signs of pests or weeds. The work is steady and often heavy under the sun, but it is essential, for the harvest will not only feed the family but also fill the granaries of the city, pay taxes, and support the markets. Alongside the fields, shepherds guide goats and sheep, their bells jingling softly, their shadows moving slowly across the plain. Not everyone works the land. Within the city, artisans begin their day. In workshops along narrow streets, potters shape clay on wheels, their hands steady as vessels rise beneath their touch. Kilns glow faintly as yesterday's pottery bakes, ready to be painted or sold. Weavers sit at looms, their fingers pulling thread after thread, creating cloth of cotton or wool dyed with colors from plants and minerals. Metal workers hammer copper or bronze, shaping tools, weapons, or ornaments. Carpenters carve wood into furniture or carts, while jewelers polish beads of lapis lazuli or carnelian stones carried by traders from distant lands. Each artisan focuses deeply, their work both humble and vital. Children, meanwhile, fill the streets with laughter. Some help their parents, carrying water in small jars, gathering reeds, or fetching firewood. Others play with toys made of clay small animals, balls, or spinning tops. Groups of boys roll hoops through the dust, chase one another, or wrestle playfully. Girls may practice weaving small mats, imitating their mother's patient movements. Their voices echo through the alleys, bright and free, softening the hard edges of daily labor. Childhood here is brief, for soon they will join the work of their families. But in these moments of play, joy fills the air. At midday, the city slows. The sun presses heavy on the streets, and families gather in courtyards or shaded rooms for the main meal. Bowls of lentil stew, bread, dates, and perhaps fish or goat's milk fill the table. Families sit on mats, eating with their hands, sharing conversation. The meal is not grand, but nourishing, and in its sharing lies comfort. Afterward, some rest in the shade, escaping the worst of the day's heat. Children nap, artisans pause, and even the animals grow still. The city breathes softly in the quiet of the afternoon dot. As the sun lowers once more, life stirs again. Farmers return from fields, their baskets filled with grain, vegetables, or dates. Artisans carry their goods to the market, joining traders from other neighborhoods or distant villages. The marketplace comes alive with bargaining, voices rising in a steady hum. Stalls display pottery, cloth, jewelry, tools, and baskets of food. The air is filled with the scent of spices, roasted bread, and dried fish. People move through the crowd, stopping to examine, to trade, to gossip. The market is not only a place of exchange, but of community, where news is shared, friendships renewed, and the pulse of the city felt. Evening brings families together again. Fires are lit, courtyards glow softly, and the streets fill with quiet. Conversation. Neighbors visit one another, sharing stories of the day. Children chase fireflies or play with clay dolls in the fading light. Musicians may appear, their flutes and drums adding rhythm to the evening air. In wealthier homes, scribes teach children to shape reeds into writing tools, pressing symbols into soft clay, opening the door to knowledge and opportunity. In simpler homes, mothers tell stories, passing down memories of ancestors, weaving history into words. Night settles slowly over the city. Torches flicker at gates, guards pace the walls, their footsteps steady against the stone. The stars shine brightly, unchallenged by artificial light, filling the sky with patterns watched carefully by astronomers. Families settle onto mats, wrapping themselves in woven blankets, their homes quiet once more. Dogs curl at doorways, goats settle in pens, and the city drifts into rest. Tomorrow will bring the same rhythm: work, play, trade, rest repeated again and again, the steady heartbeat of Mesopotamian life. Yet within this rhythm, there are also moments of change, moments that reveal the hidden complexity of daily existence. Some families prosper, their homes larger, their goods more abundant. Others struggle, their meals smaller, their debts heavier. Temples demand offerings, rulers collect taxes, and sometimes the burden grows heavy. But even in hardship, life continues. The city does not stop. The people adapt, finding ways to endure. The true secret of Mesopotamia lies here, in the quiet endurance of its people. Not only in the rulers or the grand monuments, but in the farmers rising with the sun, the women weaving in the shade, the children laughing in the dust. Their lives were not filled with grandeur, but with patience, with resilience, with the steady labor that sustained one of the world's first civilizations. As you let your thoughts drift tonight, imagine yourself in one of those neighborhoods. The houses close together, their walls glowing warm in the fading light. The smell of bread drifts from ovens. The laughter of children echoes in the courtyard. The hum of weaving rises from within a doorway. The stars above shine, as they always have, and the city, steady and calm, breathes around you. This is the daily life of Mesopotamia, not a story of kings or battles, but of people, ordinary and extraordinary, whose quiet lives shape the world in ways that still endure. When people of Mesopotamia began to gather into larger cities, they did not only build houses, workshops, and walls. They also began to raise massive public structures, cigarettes, meeting halls, and broad platforms that towered above the flat plains. These were not private homes, nor simple warehouses. They were landmarks of the city itself, places where people gathered, where officials worked, where records were stored, and where life took on a sense of order and permanence. To approach one of these great structures was to see, in solid clay, and stone, the strength of human cooperation. Imagine walking through a Mesopotamian city in its prime. The narrow streets open suddenly into a broad plaza, and there, rising before you, stands a ziggurat. Its base is massive, stretching wide across the ground. Above it rise terraces, each smaller than the one below, forming steps that climb steadily upward. At the top stands a chamber of brick and plaster, bright in the sunlight. From far away, the building dominates the horizon, a beacon for travelers approaching the city across flat plains. It is not built to be hidden, it is built to be seen, to remind anyone who gazes at it that here is a community strong enough to shape the earth. Into mountains. The construction of these ziggurats was an effort that bound entire cities together. Tens of thousands of mud bricks were needed, each shaped by hand. Picture the process. Workers kneeling at the edge of the river, mixing clay with straw, pressing the mixture into wooden molds, and setting them out beneath the hot sun to dry. Day after day, thousands of bricks baked hard under the heat, until they were ready to be carried. Men, women, and children all took part, lifting, stacking, passing bricks along human chains. Slowly the terraces rose. The work was steady, repetitive, almost meditative, yet every brick carried with it the touch of the people who made it. What is remarkable is that many of these bricks were stamped with marks, symbols pressed into the clay before it dried. These marks told us who oversaw the construction, what year it began, which city it belonged to. They were, in a sense, signatures left behind, silent voices of those who wanted their work remembered. Today, archaeologists still find these marks, crisp after thousands of years, reminders that each brick was more than clay, it was history pressed into solid form. The ziggurats were not built only for appearance. They had practical roles in the life of the city. Their raised platforms made them safe places to store grain or other supplies, far above the floods that sometimes swept the plains. Their high chambers provided vantage points to observe the horizon, whether for approaching travelers, distant fires, or the steady movement of stars. They were gathering points, centers of administration, places where scribes might store clay, tablets, or where city officials might meet with visiting envoys. In this way, the ziggurat was not only a monument, but also a hub of urban life. Life around these structures was busy. Markets clustered nearby, their stalls filled with baskets of grain, jars of oil, woven cloth, and pottery. Officials passed through, carrying clay tablets tucked under their arms, recording exchanges or decisions. Builders repaired steps, plastering over cracks, ensuring that the structure endured against rain and time. Children played at the base, chasing one another through the crowds, their laughter echoing against the massive walls. Travelers approaching the city often paused in awe, for the ziggurat rose like a mountain from the flatlands, a marker that they had arrived at a place of significance. The engineering behind these buildings was remarkable. Without steel or modern machinery, the people of Mesopotamia raised structures that lasted for centuries. Their secret lay in the careful layering of mud bricks, bound together with bitumen or clay mortar, and faced with fired bricks that resisted weather. Ramps were built to haul materials upward. Teams of workers coordinated to place each block, and overseers planned the geometry so that the terraces stood steady. The base of a ziggurat was so wide and strong that it anchored the entire structure, preventing collapse. Even after thousands of years, many foundations still stand, their outlines clear, their mass unshaken by time. But beyond their technical brilliance, these structures shaped the daily rhythm of the city. They were landmarks that everyone recognized, reference points for directions, centers of gathering. When people spoke of their city, they often spoke of the great building at its heart. It was woven into their identity, a source of pride that showed both outsiders and future generations that this was a place of strength, skill, and endurance. Step into the plaza at dusk. The air cools as the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the ground. The ziggurat glows softly in the fading light, its terraces bathed in gold. Families gather in the open space around it, sharing food, exchanging news, resting after the day's work. Traders pack up their stalls, artisans carry their tools home, and the plaza fills with calm. Torches flicker at the base of the great structure, their flames lighting its walls. In the quiet of evening, the ziggurat seems timeless, a steady presence that watches over the sleeping city. Today, as we walk among their ruins, the ziggurats remind us of the ambition and patience of those who built them. Their bricks are weathered, their walls crumbled, but their outlines remain unmistakable. They rise from the earth as if they had never left, silent witnesses to the centuries that have passed. Stand before one, and you feel the weight of human effort pressed into clay, the quiet determination of a people who wanted to build something that would outlast themselves. The ziggurats and temples of Mesopotamia were not only buildings, they were symbols of community, of endurance, of human creativity. They tell us that long before steel, glass, or electricity, people were shaping the world into lasting monuments. They remind us that civilization is not only written in words, but also in stone, in clay, in the structures that rise above the horizon and endure even when voices have faded. As you drift tonight, picture one of these vast towers standing against the stars. Imagine the thousands of bricks beneath your feet, each one touched by ancient hands. Imagine the quiet of the plaza, the glow of torches, the steady presence of the structure that has stood for centuries. In its silence lies not mystery, but calm endurance, a reminder that human effort, patient and steady, can shape the world and leave behind monuments that whisper across time. In the long story of humanity, there are few inventions as quietly powerful as writing. It is a simple idea marks pressed into a surface, symbols standing for words capturing thought, but it changed the course of history forever. And the first great flowering of writing, as we know it, began in Mesopotamia. Here, between the rivers, people discovered how to trap memory in clay, how to give permanence to agreements, and how to carry knowledge not only across distance, but across centuries. To step into the world of Mesopotamian writing is to enter a place where silence gave way to symbols, and where clay tablets became voices that still speak after thousands of years. Imagine the bustle of a Mesopotamian marketplace. Traders call out, baskets of grain change hands, jars of oil are carried on carts, animals are tethered nearby. Goods flow steadily, and with them comes the need for order. A farmer brings a surplus of barley. A fisherman offers his catch. A trader delivers copper from the mountains. Each exchange is important, but how can it be remembered? How can debts be tracked, promises kept, and records trusted when memory alone is fragile? It was here, in the quiet needs of daily life, that writing first found its place. At first, the marks were simple. Clay tokens in the shape of cones, spheres, or discs were used to represent goods. A cone might stand for a jar of oil, a sphere for a sheep, a disc for a measure of grain. These tokens were placed in sealed clay envelopes, carried from one person to another. But soon people realized that they could press the shape of the token directly into clay, leaving a lasting impression. From this small step came a leap. Instead of carrying objects, they carried marks. And from marks came writing. Step into the small, dim room of a scribe. The air is cool, the light soft. On a low table lies a pile of wet clay, smooth and pliable. The scribe takes a reed, its tip cut at an angle, and presses it gently into the surface. A wedge-shaped mark appears. It presses again in another direction, then again, forming patterns. These wedges are not decoration. They are cuneiform, the first true system of writing. Each cluster of marks stands for a word, a number, or an idea. Slowly, patiently, the scribe fills the surface of the tablet, recording grain delivered, land measured, debts owed, or wages paid. The sound of his work is soft. The faint press of reed against clay, the shuffle of tablets set aside to dry. Around him are shelves stacked with hardened tablets, each one a record of some moment of life. To walk into his room is to walk into a library, though not of books but of clay. Each tablet is heavy in the hand, yet light in meaning, carrying voices that will endure long after those who wrote them are gone. Writing in Mesopotamia was never only for rulers or officials. It was woven into daily life. Farmers might bring disputes over water rights to be recorded. Merchants might have contracts written down, ensuring that promises would be kept. Builders might note how many workers were employed and how many bricks were used. Taxes, rations, trade, and agreements all found their way into clay. In this way, the messy flow of life was captured, organized, and preserved. Consider the tablet of a worker receiving wages. On it, the scribe presses marks for 10 measures of barley. Another line records 2 jars of oil. The worker receives his due, and the record ensures fairness. Another tablet lists deliveries: 30 sheep delivered by Enli Bani, 5 jars of honey, 10 baskets of fish. To us, these may seem ordinary, but they are extraordinary in what they represent. They are the voices of ordinary people, their work and exchanges preserved across millennia. Not all tablets were so simple. Some told stories, recorded proverbs, or described distant lands. Over time, writing grew more complex. From simple tallies, it evolved into literature, law, and history. But in its earliest form, it was practical, grounded in the needs of daily life. That practicality was its strength, for it ensured that writing was not a luxury but a necessity. Woven into the rhythm of survival. Picture now the life of a scribe. He begins his day early, stepping into the cool room where clay waits. His reed, stylus, is his constant companion, worn smooth at the edges. He records transactions in the morning, perhaps contracts in the afternoon. He listens carefully to traders and officials, asking questions, clarifying amounts, ensuring accuracy. His work is respected, for writing is a skill that few possess. To be a scribe is to hold power, not the power of soldiers or rulers, but the quiet power of memory. For once something is pressed into clay, it endures. The tablets themselves were humble in appearance, yet mighty in meaning. Small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, they were dried in the sun or baked in kilns, hardening into permanence. Once hardened, they were almost indestructible. Fire might destroy a house, but it would only bake the tablets harder. Floods might wash away walls, but tablets sank into the mud and survived. Today, thousands of them remain, their marks still sharp, their messages still clear. To hold one is to hold the touch of an ancient hand, to see the thoughts of someone who lived 4,000 years ago dot in large cities. Entire archives of tablets were collected. Officials stored them in rooms that served as libraries, their shelves lined with neat rows. A visitor might see hundreds, even thousands, of tablets stacked together, each one a piece of the city's memory. Here were contracts, laws, inventories, and correspondence. To stand in such a room was to stand in the presence of a civilization's mind, carefully organized, patiently preserved, and yet the tablets were not silent. Even now, scholars read them and hear the voices within. One tablet might tell of a shipment of barley delayed by floods. Another might record a land dispute between neighbors. Another lists rations given to workers who built walls or canals. Another carries the faint lines of a proverb: "Do not return evil to your neighbor. Repay with kindness." These are not abstract ideas. They are glimpses of real lives recorded in clay, carried across centuries. The invention of writing in Mesopotamia was not dramatic. There was no sudden moment when the world changed overnight. Instead, it was slow, steady, practical. But in that steadiness lay greatness. By capturing thought in clay, people extended memory beyond the limits of their minds, beyond the span of their lives. They created a way for the past to speak to the future. And in doing so, they shaped history itself. Imagine sitting now in a quiet room, a clay tablet in your hands. The surface is cool, its weight solid. The wedges are neat, precise, each one placed with care. You cannot yet read them, but you can sense the presence of meaning. Someone thousands of years ago pressed these marks, thinking of their present, never knowing they would be read in a distant future. Their voice reaches you across time, patient, enduring, carried in clay dot. This is the secret of Mesopotamian writing. It was not made to dazzle, but to endure. It captured the ordinary, the everyday, and in doing so, it created something extraordinary. Today, as we read their tablets, we do not only learn of kings and rulers, we hear the footsteps of workers, the voices of traders, the hands of scribes. Their lives, pressed into clay, remain with us still. And so, as you rest tonight, imagine the quiet of a scribe's workshop, the reed scratching softly, the clay yielding to careful hands, the tablet drying in the sun. Imagine the shelves lined with rows of tablets, each one a voice waiting in silence. Imagine the calm strength of a civilization that trusted clay to carry its memory across the ages. In that silence, in those marks, lies one of the greatest gifts ever made, the gift of writing, the power of memory, the quiet endurance of words that never fade. When cities grew in Mesopotamia, life became more complex. Villages had once depended on trust, on memory, on spoken promises. But as populations swelled, as trade networks spread, as strangers began to live side by side, Memory was no longer enough. A promise could be forgotten, a bargain disputed, a boundary questioned. Out of this complexity came one of humanity's most enduring inventions, the written law. The idea was simple, but revolutionary, that rules of behavior, expectations, and punishments could be set down in writing, visible to all, lasting across generations. In Mesopotamia, law became not only a tool of rulers, but a framework for daily life. It shaped how farmers shared water, how merchants traded, how families divided inheritance, how builders were held accountable for their work. Step quietly into this world, and you will find that law was not only about justice, it was about stability, about giving people the assurance that life would move forward in order, not chaos. That picture the marketplace of a Mesopotamian city. Traders shout their prices, goods change hands, carts creak under the weight of grain or wool. In the bustle, disputes arise. A farmer claims a trader has shorted him on measures of barley. A craftsman complains that a buyer refuses to pay for pottery delivered. A family argues over the ownership of land along a canal. Without a system, these conflicts could fester into violence. With law, they could be resolved with calm authority, settled in writing, preserved in clay dot at first. Rules were spoken, passed down orally, remembered by elders. But memory was fragile, and words shifted with time. With the invention of writing, rules became fixed. Scribes pressed them into clay. Officials stored them in archives. Rulers displayed them for all to see. A contract might be simple. So-and-so will deliver 10 baskets of grain by the harvest. Another might be detailed. If a builder constructs a house and it collapses, the builder shall repair the damage at his own cost. Each mark on clay was a shield against forgetfulness, a promise of order in a busy world. Perhaps the most famous collection of Mesopotamian law was the Code of Hammurabi. Though it belonged to Babylon centuries after the first cities rose, it carried the spirit of Mesopotamian order. Imagine the tall stone stele, its surface carved with hundreds of laws. Each one was precise, covering matters of trade, property, family, and labor. Some were stern, others practical, but all were intended to shape life within the city walls. The stone stood in a public place where anyone could see it. The message was clear. Rules did not belong only to rulers. They belonged to the people, but law was not abstract. It touched every corner of daily life. If two farmers disputed the boundary of their fields, a scribe could record the exact measurement, and a judge could decide. If a trader promised delivery of goods and failed, the written contract determined what he owed. If a worker received rations for his labor, the amount was written, and if shorted, he could point to the record. These small protections built trust, and trust allowed cities to grow. Consider the life of a judge in Mesopotamia. He sits in a shaded courtyard, clay tablets stacked before him. Farmers, traders, and artisans approach, each with their disputes. The judge listens patiently, calls upon scribes to read records, weighs evidence, and delivers decisions. His work is steady, not dramatic, but essential. Without it, chaos would creep into the streets, markets, and fields. With it, life moves forward, orderly and predictable. Law also touched family life. Rules governed inheritance, ensuring that land passed fairly. Contracts recorded marriages, not only binding families together, but also protecting property and Children, even the adoption of children was written, with rights and responsibilities carefully noted. In these writings we see not only transactions, but also the quiet structure of society, the framework that allowed families to endure across generations. Accountability was at the heart of Mesopotamian law. Builders were responsible for their work, traders for their goods, farmers for their harvests. If someone failed in their duty, the law demanded restitution. This was not cruelty, but order, a recognition that the actions of one person affected the community, and that fairness required responsibility. Such rules gave people confidence to build, to trade, to cooperate. Without them, trust would falter. The tablets themselves tell the story. Archaeologists today find contracts pressed with wedge-shaped marks, listing names, dates, and goods. One tablet records the rental of a field for barley planting. Another lists the wages of workers who carried bricks. Another describes the loan of silver, to be repaid with interest. Each tablet is more than a legal record. It is a glimpse of human lives seeking fairness. The words are steady, the marks neat, the tone calm. Together they form a library not of stories, but of order. Law also shaped the very layout of the city. Archives of tablets were stored in palaces and administrative buildings, sometimes in large rooms filled wall to wall with shelves. Officials guarded these archives, for within them lay the memory of agreements, the stability of the city itself. To lose them would be to lose the thread of order. Yet many survived, baked in accidental fires, hardened by chance, waiting millennia to be raid again. Even punishments, though sometimes harsh, carried a logic. If a thief was caught, restitution was required. If a worker failed, responsibility was enforced. The principle was clear. Actions had consequences, and those consequences were known in advance. This predictability was itself a comfort. To live under law was to know what to expect, to live not in fear of random judgment, but in the security of written order. At night, when the markets closed and the city grew quiet, the tablets rested in their shelves, silent but enduring. The torches flickered on the walls, the streets emptied, the courtyards cooled. Families slept, and judges, scribes, and workers rested. Yet the laws they had shaped remained, pressed into clay, waiting for tomorrow. In this way, law was not only about justice, it was about continuity. It tied the days together, bound generations to one another, carried the memory of fairness across time. Today, as we read those ancient tablets, the voices of Mesopotamia speak clearly. They tell us that law was not abstract, but lived. It was, in the fields, in the markets, in the courtyards of families. It was in the wages of workers, the measurements of land, the agreements of traders. It was the quiet foundation of civilization, steady and enduring, as essential as water and brick. So, as you let your thoughts drift tonight, picture a small clay tablet resting in your hand. Its marks are neat, its surface smooth. On it is written a promise, a contract, a rule. Thousands of years ago, someone pressed those marks, ensuring that memory would not be lost, that fairness would endure. And as you close your eyes, let the calm of that thought guide you, that even in the earliest days of cities, people sought not only survival but justice, not only food but fairness, not only life but order. If the rivers were the lifeblood of Mesopotamia, then trade was its pulse. The land between the Tigris and the Euphrates was fertile, yet it lacked many of the resources a growing civilization needed. There were no great forests for timber, no rich mines of metal, no endless mountains of stone. And yet Mesopotamia thrived not by what it had, but by what it exchanged. It became a crossroads where goods, ideas, and people flowed steadily, tying the cities of the rivers to distant lands across deserts, seas, and mountains. Step into a Mesopotamian marketplace at its height. The plaza is alive with sound. Traders call out prices. Animals bleat. The smell of roasted bread and dried fish fills the air. Baskets of barley lie in neat rows. Jars of date syrup glisten in the sun. Clay pots, painted and polished, are stacked carefully beside woven mats and baskets. Children weave between stalls, chasing one another, while women haggle with traders, their voices rising above the hum. At one edge of the market, a caravan has just arrived, its donkeys loaded with bundles wrapped in cloth, their backs swaying under the weight of goods from far beyond the city walls. The goods of Mesopotamia were many. Barley, dates, and wool formed the foundation. Barley was more than food. It was currency measured carefully, weighed precisely, and exchanged for goods and labor. Dates, harvested from tall palm groves, provided sweetness and nourishment. Wool from sheep and goats was spun into thread, woven into cloth, dyed with colors, and traded near and far. Alongside these staples came fish from the rivers, reeds woven into mats, clay shaped into pots. These were the ordinary goods of daily life, and they formed the steady rhythm of trade within the cities themselves. But Mesopotamia also reached outward, far beyond its plains, for what it lacked. From the mountains to the north came timber, strong and tall, carried in great logs downriver, or dragged by caravans. From the east came precious stones, lapis lazuli, turquoise, carnelian, their deep colors glowing in the hands of jewelers. From the west and south came metals, copper, tin, silver, and gold. With copper and tin, artisans forged bronze, shaping tools and weapons far stronger than stone. From the coasts came shells, their smooth curves polished into ornaments. Each object carried not only material value, but also the mark of distance, a reminder that it had traveled across lands to arrive here. Imagine the caravans themselves. Long lines of donkeys stretch across the desert, each carrying bundles tied with rope. Traders walk beside them, their sandals kicking up dust, their faces shaded against the sun. At night, the caravan halts. Fires are lit, bread is baked, water is shared from skin bags. The donkeys rest, their loads set down in neat rows, while the traders sit in circles, speaking in low voices, sharing news from their home cities. The stars shine bright above. The desert wind cools the night, and in this stillness the caravan prepares for another day's journey. Rivers, too, were highways of trade. Along the Euphrates long canoes glided, their hulls packed with grain, jars of oil, and baskets of dates. Men with long poles guided them, pushing steadily against the current, or raised simple sails when the wind was kind. The water carried goods faster than roads, linking distant towns with smooth efficiency. On the docks of a city, boats were loaded and unloaded, workers shouting, ropes creaking, goods stacked in neat piles, ready for the market. The river was not only life for the fields, it was a road for the world, gut trade, connected not only goods but people. Imagine a trader arriving in a Mesopotamian city from far away. His accent is different, his clothing unfamiliar, his goods exotic. Crowds gather to see what he brings, perhaps blue stones from Afghanistan, or fine wood from Lebanon, or copper from Anatolia. He sets up his stall, lays out his wares, and begins to bargain. Children stare in awe. Women run their hands. Over fabrics they have never seen, artisans study metals they will later shape into tools. The marketplace becomes not only a place of exchange but of wonder, a window into lands beyond the horizon. Trade also required trust, and trust required records. Contracts were written on clay tablets, one line recording the goods exchanged, another the date, another the parties involved. A farmer trading barley for wool might have it written so neither side could deny the bargain later. A caravan leader promising delivery of copper might sign his name in wedges of cuneiform, ensuring payment upon arrival. These tablets gave structure to trade, preventing disputes, building confidence that agreements would hold. Without them, trade might falter. With them, it flourished. Markets themselves were more than places of buying and selling. They were centers of life. News traveled through them, carried by traders who had seen distant cities. A rumor from the mountains, a story from the coast, a whisper of war, a tale of abundance, all passed through the markets. Ideas spread here. New ways to shape clay, new styles of weaving, new patterns of jewelry. The market was both economic and cultural, a place where the world touched Mesopotamia, and where Mesopotamia touched the world. At dusk, the market calmed. Traders packed their goods, families carried baskets home, the plaza emptied. The air cooled, the torches lit, and the marketplace became quiet. But the goods remained stored in houses, piled in warehouses, noted on tablets. Tomorrow it would live again, the hum returning, the pulse of the city beating steady. The flow of goods also shaped cities themselves. Warehouses lined the riverbanks, their walls filled with grain and wool. Stables housed donkeys waiting for the next journey. Workshops stood near the markets, ready to turn raw copper into tools, raw wool into cloth, raw stone into jewelry. Entire neighborhoods grew around trade, each tied to the rhythm of arrival and departure, of exchange and craft. And yet, trade was not without risk. Caravans faced bandits on lonely roads. Floods might wash away boats. Droughts might shrink harvests, leaving fewer goods to sell. Traders carried not only goods, but uncertainty. And still they went on, step by step, boat by boat, day by day. For without trade, the cities would wither. With it, they thrived. Today, as we read the tablets of Mesopotamia, we see trade recorded in detail. Lists of barley, sheep, copper, oil, contracts for delivery, notes of payment, inventories of goods. They may seem ordinary, but they are extraordinary in their endurance. They show us the pulse of a civilization, not through its wars or rulers, but through its daily exchanges, its simple acts of giving and receiving. So as you rest tonight, imagine a Mesopotamian marketplace in the fading light. The stalls empty, the dust settling, the torches flickering. A caravan rests outside the walls, its donkeys quiet, its traders sleeping under the stars. The river glides by, its waters carrying boats into the night. The city is calm, but tomorrow the hum will return, the pulse of trade will beat again, and life will flow steadily, as it has for centuries. This is the secret of Mesopotamian trade. Not noise, not drama, but steady movement, patient exchange, the quiet rhythm of goods, and people flowing through time. When we picture Mesopotamia, we often imagine its great walls, its broad canals, its towering ziggurats, and its busy markets. Yet beneath these grand structures lies the quiet foundation of it all: work. It was the hands of countless ordinary people that shaped the bricks, spun the thread, hammered the copper, and baked the clay. It was their steady labor, day after day, that gave life to the cities. Without their patience, there would be no palaces, no marketplaces, no tablets filled with writing. To step into the world of Mesopotamian work is to listen to the hum of countless tasks. Simple, steady, essential dot at dawn, the city stirred to life. Smoke rose from hearths, donkeys brayed in stables, and streets filled with the footsteps of men and women heading to their tasks. Work in Mesopotamia was varied, shaped by the needs of the city and the skills of its people. Some went to the fields beyond the walls, their tools over their shoulders, ready to dig, plant, and harvest. Others stayed within the city, moving into workshops tucked behind narrow streets. Each person carried a role, and together those roles wove the fabric of urban life. Step first into the workshop of a potter. The air is warm, heavy with the smell of clay. Along the walls, shelves sag under the weight of bowls, jars, and vases, in various stages of completion. At the center, a potter sits at his wheel, his hands wet, his eyes focused. The wheel spins steadily, turned by his foot, while his fingers rise along the clay, shaping it upward into a tall vessel. With each movement, the clay obeys, its form emerging from formlessness. Children sit nearby, smoothing smaller pieces, learning the motions that will one day be theirs. At the far end of the room, a kiln glows faintly, its heat seeping into the air, hardening yesterday's work into permanence. To walk through this space is to feel the hum of craft, quiet, patient, enduring. Now step into the shop of a weaver. Threads hang in bundles, dyed in soft earth tones or bright hues from plants and minerals. At a large loom, a woman guides the shuttle back and forth, pulling the thread tight, building the fabric row by row. The sound is steady, the clack of wood, the pull of fiber, a rhythm that fills the room like a heartbeat. Mats, blankets, tunics, and robes emerge slowly from her hands, each one carrying hours of labor. Young girls sit nearby, twisting threads, learning the patience required to keep them even. In this workshop, silence is filled with purpose, the quiet creation of cloth that will warm families, dress traders, and line the markets. Metal workers brought another sound to the city. In their forges, the ring of hammers echoed, striking copper or bronze into tools, weapons, or ornaments. The fire roared in clay furnaces, bellows hissed, sparks flew. A worker lifts a hammer, his muscles straining, and brings it down upon glowing metal, shaping it with precision. Another quenches the hot blade in water, steam rising in a hiss. The work is dangerous, the heat overwhelming, but the results are strong. Plows for the fields, chisels for the builders, knives for the kitchens, jewelry for the markets. Each piece, no matter how small, carried the mark of skill and patience. Carpenters worked with quieter tools, Their workshops smelled of wood, rare and precious in Mesopotamia, imported from distant lands. They shaped beams for houses, frames for carts, handles for tools. With chisels and saws, they turned logs into furniture, smooth and functional. Their benches were lined with shavings, their floors with sawdust, their hands rough with splinters. Yet their work was essential, for without wood there could be no doors, no wagons, no cradles for children. Stone cutters shaped what the rivers provided. Heavy slabs dug from the earth, carved with patience. Their chisels struck steadily, shaping blocks for walls, steps for buildings, or figures to line plazas. The sound of stone cutting was slower, heavier, each strike echoing through the neighborhood. Dust clung to their clothes, chips of rock lay scattered at their feet, but the blocks they produced built the bones of the city, and beyond these workshops there were countless other tasks. Bakers rose early, grinding grain, mixing dough, shaping loaves for the morning market. Brewers stirred vats of fermenting grain, producing drink for workers and families. Reed workers wove mats, baskets, and sandals, their fingers moving quickly among the stalks. Fishermen mended nets, their hands tying knots in the shade. Shepherds guided flocks outside the city, their voices carrying softly across the plain. Each trade, each task, was a thread in the fabric of Mesopotamian life. Work was often cooperative. Families labored together, children learning from parents, siblings sharing tasks. Neighbors helped one another during harvest or construction. Large projects like repairing canals or building walls required whole communities. Workers lined up, passing bricks hand to hand, digging side by side, sweating under the sun. In these moments, the hum of labor became a chorus, a reminder that survival depended not only on individuals, but on the collective strength of many hands. Yet work was not only necessity, it was also pride. An artisan shaping a pot, a weaver creating cloth, a metal worker hammering bronze, each took satisfaction in their skill. Their goods were displayed in markets, admired by neighbors, carried away by traders to distant lands. A well-made tool or vessel was not just an object, but a mark of identity, a sign that the craftsperson's hand had shaped something that would endure. For the ordinary worker, life was hard. The days were long, the tasks repetitive, the heat relentless. Backs bent under loads, hands blistered, muscles ached. Yet in the evening, when the work was done, there was rest. Families gathered in courtyards, eating bread, lentils, dates, and fish. Children played in the dust, neighbors shared stories. Musicians filled the air with the sound of flutes or drums. The labor of the day gave way to the calm of the night, and in that rhythm lay balance. The secret of Mesopotamian craft lies not only in the objects they left behind, the pottery, the cloth, the tools, but in the hands that made them. Each vessel was touched by fingers smoothing its surface. Each thread was pulled by patient hands at the loom. Each brick was shaped in mud, lifted, and placed by shoulders that bore its weight. These objects endure because they were made with quiet persistence, with steady effort that asked for no recognition, only usefulness. Today, as we study their remains, we find pots in ruins, tools buried in soil, cloth preserved only in fragments. Yet even these fragments speak. They tell us of the hands that shaped them, of the workshops filled with labor, of the streets alive with craft. They remind us that civilization is not built only by rulers and monuments, but by ordinary people whose work carries the weight of daily life. So tonight, as you close your eyes, picture a Mesopotamian city at dusk. The workshops grow quiet. The potter's wheel stops spinning. The kiln cools. The weaver sets aside her loom, the threads resting in stillness. The hammer falls silent in the forge, the fire dimming. In the courtyards, families sit together, their hands resting after long hours of labor. The city hums softly, not with noise, but with the calm presence of work completed. This is the legacy of Mesopotamia's hands, quiet, steady, enduring. When we walk today among the ruins of Mesopotamia, we find the outlines of streets, the remains of walls, the fragments of clay tablets, once filled with words. These cities were once alive with sound, the clatter of carts in the marketplace, the laughter of children in courtyards, the hum of scribes at their tables. Yet now they are silent. The question that lingers is not only why they fell, but how they fell. The collapse of Mesopotamian cities was not sudden, not a single night of fire and ruin, but a long, slow fading, a decline that crept silently, generation by generation, until the plazas stood empty and the winds carried only dust. The first signs were subtle. Crops that once grew tall began to falter. The rivers, which had given life for centuries, began to shift. Canals filled with silt, demanding more labor to keep them clear. In some years, the floods did not come as expected, leaving the soil dry and cracked. In others, the floods came too strongly, sweeping away homes and drowning fields. Farmers who had once filled the granaries struggled to feed their families, let alone supply the markets. The rhythm of abundance gave way to uncertainty, and uncertainty spread like a shadow through the streets. As food grew scarce, tensions rose. Families who had once traded barley for cloth or dates for fish found less to exchange. Markets grew quieter, stalls emptier. Traders who had once traveled great distances returned with fewer goods, their caravans lighter, their voices subdued. The hum of trade slowed, the pulse of the city weakening. In some neighborhoods, houses were abandoned. Families packed their belongings, left their courtyards, and sought better land. Each departure was small, but together they drained the life of the city. Political strain deepened the cracks. City-states that had once thrived on cooperation turned more often to rivalry. Leaders demanded more from their people to fund wars, more taxes, more labor, more supplies. Armies marched across the plains, leaving fields untended, canals broken, villages burned. Families fled from the path of conflict, abandoning the homes they had built. Each war was short in memory, but long in consequence. Fields left empty. One season took years to recover. Canals left broken, silted over, their flow lost. Piece by piece, the infrastructure of life unraveled. For ordinary people, the collapse was not a single catastrophe, but a steady erosion of comfort. Imagine a family living near the walls of a great city. Once, their courtyard was filled with grain after harvest, their shelves with pots of dates, their hearths with warm bread. The father worked in the fields, the mother at the loom, the children played in the dust. But as the years passed, the harvest grew smaller. The looms produced cloth fewer could afford, and the laughter of children grew quieter. The family sold possessions to survive. They bartered tools, then animals, then land. Finally, when nothing remained, they left, joining a stream of others walking quietly away from the city. their footsteps carrying them into silence. Some cities tried to adapt. Leaders organized larger irrigation works, hoping to tame the shifting rivers. Communities pooled resources to repair canals, rebuild walls, and reopen trade routes. For a time, life steadied, but the weight of effort grew heavier each year. Droughts lingered longer, wars returned sooner, and the land itself seemed to resist. Even the strongest efforts could not hold back the tide of decline. Step into a once busy plaza in the final years of a city's life. The market stalls are fewer, their goods sparse. The ziggurat or central hall stands weathered, its bricks cracked, its plaster faded. Children no longer fill the courtyards with games. Their families have left or struggle quietly inside their homes. The air is still, the hum of trade replaced by silence. A few scribes still write, their tablets recording debts that may never be repaid, contracts that may never be fulfilled. Their marks are steady, but their voices carry an unspoken doubt. How long can this continue? Nature, too, played its role. The soil, farmed for centuries, grew tired. Without careful rest, without rotation, it hardened and cracked. Salt from irrigation water rose slowly into the fields, leaving behind white crusts that poisoned crops. Farmers bent over their land and saw not green but gray, not promise but decay. The rivers, once generous, shifted course, leaving cities stranded far from their lifelines. What had once been fertile became barren, and the land itself whispered of departure. And so the cities emptied, not in fire and chaos, but in quiet footsteps. Families left, one by one, carrying children, baskets, memories. Their houses fell, silent, their courtyards filled with dust. Their doors sagged on broken hinges. The streets, once filled with carts and voices, grew overgrown with weeds. The plazas, once alive with trade and festivals, echoed only with the wind. The great walls cracked, bricks falling slowly, year after year. The city, once strong, faded into shadow. For those who remained, life narrowed. They tended smaller fields, traded with fewer neighbors, lived with more caution. They saw their city shrinking, but they carried on. Perhaps they hoped for renewal, for the return of abundance. Perhaps they simply endured, because life offered no other choice. Their patience was immense, their endurance remarkable. But in time, even they moved on, leaving the stones to the silence. The collapse of Mesopotamian cities was not a single moment of destruction. It was a long twilight, a slow dimming of the lights of civilization. It teaches us that even the greatest centers of human effort are fragile, bound to the soil, the water, the climate, and the balance of cooperation. When those bonds fray, decline follows, not in thunder, but in silence. Not in a single night, but in generations of fading dot. Today, we see the ruins. We walk through the outlines of streets, step across foundations, read tablets preserved in the soil. We sense the presence of what once was, the hum of lives that filled these spaces. And we know that their silence is not emptiness, but memory. Each fallen wall, each broken tablet, each dried canal tells a story of effort, endurance, and eventual surrender to time dot. So as you let your thoughts drift tonight, imagine one of those cities at dusk in its final years. The plaza quiet, the market nearly empty, the walls cracked, the houses abandoned. The wind carries dust through the streets. settling on clay tablets left unread. The river flows in the distance, but no longer touches the city's heart. And above it all, silence stretches, calm and steady, as the city breathes its last. This is the silent collapse of Mesopotamia, not sudden, not violent, but patient, inevitable, and complete. And in that silence lies a strange peace, the reminder that even as cities fade, the memory of their people endures, carried in clay, carried in ruins, carried in the quiet flow of history. When we speak of Mesopotamia, we are not only speaking of a land between two rivers, or of a series of cities now lying in ruins. We are speaking of a beginning, the beginning of many patterns of life that still shape us today. Though their walls have fallen, though their streets are empty, the people of Mesopotamia left behind gifts so deeply woven into human history that they continue to guide our daily lives. Their legacy is not only in museums or textbooks. It lingers in the very structure of our world. The most enduring gift was writing. In the wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform, pressed patiently into wet clay, humanity learned to capture memory. Words that once vanished as soon as they were spoken now remained. Laws, trade agreements, proverbs, and stories were carried not only in minds, but in tablets that endured through centuries. This quiet invention expanded human memory beyond a single life. It allowed knowledge to accumulate, to be shared, to be built upon. Every book, every document, every note written today traces back, in some way, to those first careful impressions in clay. Alongside writing came law. In Mesopotamia, rules were recorded, displayed, preserved. For the first time, people lived under laws that were not shifting with memory or rumor, but steady in writing. They could point to them, trust them, rely on them. Law gave order to cities, fairness to trade, structure to family life. It set expectations and enforced responsibility. The idea that society should be guided by written rules, not only by power or memory, remains one of Mesopotamia's most powerful legacies. Mesopotamia also gave us the city itself. Villages had existed for millennia, but here the city was born, with streets, markets, walls, archives, and neighborhoods of specialized crafts. The idea that thousands of people could live side by side, sharing water, trade, and work, was tested and proven in the plains of Mesopotamia. The pattern of urban life, the hum of markets, the rhythm of work, the presence of central institutions, has never left us. Each modern city carries an echo of Ur, of yore, of Babylon. Their craft and labor endure in memory as well. The pottery, the weaving, the bronze tools, the carved stones. These were not luxuries, but the fabric of life. Each object carries the mark of human hands, the patience of artisans who shaped clay, thread, or metal into something useful. Their skill and persistence remind us that civilizations are not only built by rulers or armies, but by ordinary people, whose steady labor shapes the world. Mesopotamia also left us their ingenuity in managing the land. They learned to guide rivers with canals, to store water, to irrigate fields, to make fertile soil yield harvest after harvest. Their techniques influenced generations, spreading outward into neighboring lands. Even today, the idea of irrigation, as the heart of agriculture, remains, its roots stretching back to the muddy banks of the Tigris and Euphrates. Science, too, found its early shape here. By watching the steady movement of the stars, Mesopotamians learned to track time, to mark, seasons to guide agriculture and trade. Their measurements of days, months, and years gave structure to calendars still echoed in our own. Their careful observations of numbers, distances, and weights provided the beginnings of mathematics, a language that has since carried humanity into the farthest reaches of understanding. And yet, perhaps the greatest legacy of Mesopotamia is its memory of endurance. These cities rose from mud and reed, grew into hubs of life, and endured for centuries before fading. They remind us that greatness is not only in triumph, but also in persistence. Generations of families built homes, planted fields, wove cloth, wrote tablets, and raised children. Their lives were ordinary, but together they built something extraordinary. Today, when we walk among the ruins, we see the stones, the broken bricks, the faded tablets. But we also feel their presence, the hum of work, the rhythm of trade, the silence of collapse, the endurance of memory. Mesopotamia's legacy is not gone. It flows quietly through us, in the words we write, the laws we follow, the cities we build, the calendars we keep, the measures we use. It is all around us, though we seldom notice. So, as we reflect on this story, let us remember that Mesopotamia was not only a land between rivers. It was the land where memory first found permanence, where rules found order, where cities found shape. Its legacy is the quiet foundation of the world we know today. And so our journey through Mesopotamia comes gently to its end. We have walked along the rivers where life began, wandered through the streets of the first cities, stepped into the workshops of artisans, and listened to the scratch of reeds against clay. We have watched trade flow through markets and caravans, seen laws written into tablets, and felt the slow fading of cities into silence. What remains is not only ruins, but memory. The voices of farmers, scribes, traders, and builders still echo softly, carried in the clay they shaped and the structures they built. Their lives, though ordinary in their time, became the foundation of so much that followed. To rest among their ruins is to rest among our own beginnings. Take a deep breath now. Imagine the wide plain stretching between the rivers, the fields bending gently in the wind, the outlines of walls glowing in the light of dusk. The city hums faintly, then grows still, until only silence remains. Above, the stars shine as they always have, steady and eternal. The same stars watched by those who once lived here. As you drift toward rest, let the calm of Mesopotamia guide you. Its story is not one of noise or spectacle, but of quiet endurance, of patience, of steady work carried across centuries. The people are gone, but their legacy remains, woven into every word written, every law recorded, every city built. Good night, and may the calm of history carry you gently into sleep.